USDA is proposing a National Animal Identification System, also known as NAIS, and this would involve three different things. First, there would be a premises registration, so anyone that had even a single chicken, or if you had a herd of cattle, you would have your property registered. Each animal would then have their own identification number. The third thing would be an animal tracking system. USDA wants the GPS coordinates for each of the premises registrations so that they can track each animal. USDA says their mission is to protect human health, and that the animal identification system would allow them to quickly identify any potentially infected animals should there be an outbreak of bird flu, mad cow disease, salmonella, or E. coli poisonings. USDA started off wanting NAIS to be a mandatory program, but there was such an outcry from the agricultural community that they backed off and said it would be voluntary. But what they're doing is they're putting such restrictions on. So for example, if a federally inspected slaughterhouse wants to sell meat, they have to only accept meat that comes from farms that are in the program, so that have a premises registration. They're only allowed to accept animals that have identification. So if you're a small farmer and you have a small herd of cows or a small flock of sheep, you would need every single animal to be tagged. If your animals get out of their fence and run over to your neighbor's farm, you then immediately have to contact the USDA and report where your animals have been. On the surface, a national animal identification system is a good idea. Europe has implemented many animal identification systems, and they're all focused on consumer confidence.
First of all, each herd has a specific number, what we call a herd number.
Here is his number, 401 and so on. That's his unique number.
Then you have the numbers on the ear tags, and that's a completely different number. So when we scan that barcode or put in that number into the computer, then automatically we know on which farm, in which herd that animal lives.
If you get a piece of beef, you can go to the counter, you can scan it, you can see a photo of the farm, you can see the history of the animal. You know exactly where your meat came from and the health of the animal, the health of the farm. That is a selling point. The problem is USDA would be the organization that would be implementing this program, and USDA has absolutely no credibility. Look at our farm, for example. We brought over sheep from Europe and started the Scrapie surveillance program. So very similar, national program implemented by each state, just like the National Animal Identification System would be a national program implemented by each state. When our sheep met all the requirements to be certified free of the disease, instead of getting our certification, USDA accused them of being susceptible to mad cow disease, a disease that sheep don't even get. And the ultimate consequence was that USDA showed up at our farm, seized our animals, and killed them. One of the things that USDA says is, well, if there's an outbreak of mad cow disease, we want to be able to gather up all the cows. Well, USDA has all the necessary tools right now to make sure that there's not an outbreak of mad cow disease in the United States, but they are not using any of the tools. They are not making it mandatory that meat and bone meal not be fed to any animals. They are not using a testing program. Every single animal over the age of anywhere between 24 to 30 months, every single bovine in the United States should be tested for mad cow disease. Instead, less than 40,000 animals out of a 10 million population are actually tested. So there's no safety whatsoever in the American meat supply. And that's where USDA should be spending their money. They should not put all the money from National Animal Identification System into this bureaucratic morass. In almost every single state, organizations have sprung up to protest against NAIS. And the reason is that farmers are for food safety, but they're against the USDA. They don't trust that USDA will implement the program in a proper way. USDA should be protecting consumer health and taking care of animal health. But in reality, if you look at their track record, look at what they did to us, look at Creekstone Farms that wanted to assure their consumers that their animals were free of mad cow disease, were going to do the testing, pay for it themselves. When they went to buy the test kit, USDA threatened to imprison them. Creekstone Farms is currently suing the USDA to have the right to guarantee consumer confidence. If you look at GMOs and the way the USDA pushes through corporate interest ahead of public safety, there's no required labeling for BST, a hormone that's used in cattle. The premise of NAIS is that the diseases are going to come from small farms, where in reality it's the factory farming and the practices of factory farming which are resulting in these outbreaks of diseases. Many of these things are picked up in the slaughterhouses, not on the farm, and the tracking stops as soon as the animal gets to the slaughterhouses. So therefore it doesn't address the issue of how the food is processed. So if it's going through a very fast slaughterhouse system where people are not taking the best care, there's much more risk than having a couple chickens running around in a backyard. With NAIS, there's a very strong push to have animals confined, like if there's an outbreak of avian influenza, where in reality, the healthiest place for animals is outside. That's the natural environment. That's where the animals should be. You have problems when animals get in a confinement system. That is where many of the diseases are originating. So if USDA really wants to take care of animal safety, public safety, give some consumer confidence, they should be regulating the large factory operations. They're controlled by the corporations, the very entities that they're supposed to be regulating. And the problem is that USDA, instead of being a people agency, an agency that's looking out for the people, they're looking out for the interest of the corporations. I think ultimately the National Animal Identification System will be struck down. I don't think there's going to be enough support for it, but I think producer groups across the country will organize and that local farmers will have local control of the food supply, and they will give more assurances than any government-run program could ever do. There are diseases of concern which could be eradicated if there were particular programs put into place, such as the Scrapie program. The problem is that you can't trust the agency which is supposed to be administering the program. So it leaves everyone in a dilemma because the diseases should and could be eradicated, but you can't trust the agency. You can't trust the USDA. There are options. Go to your farmer's market, meet the farmers that are there, go to restaurants and stores that are buying from local farmers that know exactly where the food comes from. When you go into a restaurant, say, where did you get the beef for the steak? Where did you get the vegetables? People are more concerned about where their food's coming from. And the fact that there's been such a public outcry against NAIS shows that people are not trusting USDA. They're trusting their local farmers instead.